Welcome to the Kennedy Report. I'm Kennedy Hall. Archbishop Vigano has come out with another explosive interview. Usually it's letters, but this is a specific interview that he gave to an Italian TV channel. He spoke about the Society of St. Pius X, Marcel Lefebvre, the Second Vatican Council. Is Benedict still Pope? The St. Gallen Mafia, so this internal sort of church mafia, and the World Economic Forum. And that was just in the first 3 or 4 questions. We're only going to go over a little bit of it. The second half of the interview, or probably about 2/3 of it, was more based on specific Italian political things, which we're not going to concern ourselves with. This originally, at least I saw it, it appeared as a transcript over at Marco Tassati's blog. I haven't seen it anywhere else yet. Who knows, by the time I get this video up, maybe it'll be somewhere else. Okay, he's got a lot to say, so let's get right into it. But just before we do, thank you for all the support. It's been overwhelming. I promise the green screen and the lights are coming soon, but, you know, at times are delayed with deliveries and shipping and all this kind of stuff we're experiencing as a result of all the, you know, problems with the administration of governments. You've heard of those things before, I'm sure. And also, please watch until the end, because I'm going to have some news about our upcoming subscription service. Okay, so this is question number 1 that was given to Vigano. It says, beginning with the Second Vatican Council, Masonic infiltrations within the Catholic Church have become increasingly substantial. Progressivism and relativism have been employed as weapons to undermine fidelity to tradition. Did Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, who was excommunicated by John Paul II in 1988, I don't agree that he was excommunicated validly, but okay, that's fine, therefore sense that Catholicism was on the brink of the abyss? Here's Archbishop Vigano's response. Certainly, Archbishop Lefebvre was one of the few, very few prelates who wanted to denounce the conciliar revolution, understanding its subversive nature. And I say who wanted because many other prelates understood that a real revolution was underway. Some saw it as a danger, others saw it as a springtime in the church. You've probably heard that term, springtime. But among those who saw the danger, almost no one knew how to denounce it openly. Today we understand the historical merit of Archbishop Lefebvre in having rebelled against the line dictated by the conciliar he calls it politburo. I don't know what that means. I guess political bureaucracy. That's what he's trying to say. It's probably an Italian term. And having created the premises for a return of the Church to the doctrine of the Holy Mass of all time. Doctrine and Holy Mass of all time. So, I don't agree that the problems began with the Second Vatican Council, and this isn't a question about, you know, how one should or should not interpret the Council. I also don't agree with the questioner. He says was excommunicated. It was declared that he had been excommunicated by his own actions by Pope John Paul II. That's not the same thing as the Pope saying, I hereby excommunicate you. Those are different things. Then you have to look at the actual actions. That's a whole other conversation for another day. But it's interesting that the first question here by this interviewer is about Lefebvre. Interesting. Archbishop Vigano has spoken about Lefebvre before and talked about him as basically a great service to the church. We're seeing that as time passes, more and more people are becoming, I guess, wise to the position of the SSPX and the position of Marcel Lefebvre in the church. You know, there's an expression that no prophet, no prophet is accepted in his own home. That's a paraphrasing. And I would also say when you look in the past in Scripture, for example, that prophets are not welcome in their own time, often by their own ecclesial authorities. Look at the prophets of the Old Testament. I'm not saying Archbishop Lefebvre was on the par of Jeremiah or something like that. But it is interesting that he was sort of a voice crying out in the wilderness, and he was sort of persecuted from within the church for doing so. So, very telling remarks here from Vigano. The next question, he says, could the St. Gallen Mafia be considered as a sort of ecclesiastical World Economic Forum? It's kind of a leading question, but it's an interesting one. Vigano says, if we identify the World Economic Forum as a private lobby that has placed its followers in the most important posts of national, international public institutions in order to impose the globalist agenda against the will of the citizens, it is certainly fitting to see a parallel with the St. Gallen Mafia. In a similar way, this cabal of conspirators also placed its agents in the Roman Curia and in the peripheral organs of the Church, just as it imposed the conciliar agenda against the will of the faithful. But just as there is not only the World Economic Forum in the public sphere, so there is not only the St. Gallen Mafia in the ecclesiastical sphere. We are facing a global coup that involves both civil society and the Church. Both are infiltrated and controlled by characters who use their power and the authority that derives from it, not only for the purposes of institutions they govern, but in order to destroy them. This crisis of authority must be denounced because the actions of those who have reached the highest levels of leadership, both of nations and of the church, is a subversive and criminal act. So a couple things I found really interesting here. I like how he mentions that there is not only the World Economic Forum. People know me that I am definitely not anti so-called conspiracy theories. There's many conspiracies that have turned out to be true. But I am skeptical of this idea that there is an easy cookie or clean-cut narrative to explain the totality of how all things are run. I know that, and I've done a video here about why Klaus Schwab's Great Reset is doomed to fail. I know the World Economic Forum is an important lobby organization. I know that. I know they've admitted that they've penetrated the Canadian government, for example, with placing people in certain positions. What we're dealing here is with as a lobby group, essentially. And lobby groups are very powerful, and they have more or less power depending on the time that they're operating and what the resources they're operating with. Okay, fine. But they're not the only one. And you have to remember that these folks who are these power-hungry, cut your throat to get ahead, stab you in the back to get ahead type of people, they're like that with everybody. They might have their own, if you can hear my dog barking in the background, they might have their own allegiances, loyalties to people that are useful to their cause, but they don't have virtue. They don't have fidelity to the truth for the sake of it, you know? So anyway, you know, if you look at the history of these communist powers and things, they were constantly being assassinated and had to worry about somebody assassinating them and taking them out or taking over their power and back and forth. So I understand that the World Economic Forum is important, but I appreciate how the Archbishop said there are more than the World Economic Forum. Some people might take that and say, well, that means it's worse than we thought. I personally don't think so, because I think it's time that we realize, at least in my opinion, that there's not one single global group that controls everything. And in fact, I think that's one of the lies of the devil. Not that there aren't people who are aligned in ideology, but really the one group, the one organization that would be in control of the world, properly understood, would be the church established by Jesus Christ, where you find the apostles, where you find the bishops, you know. That is where there is universal authority. So I think one of the tricks of the devil is to try to convince people that there's one group that is basically the complete ape of the church. Sure, there are prophecies about end times and Antichrist and these kinds of things, and how that will turn out, goodness knows. But nonetheless, I appreciate what the Archbishop said here. Within the church, he says that it's not just the St. Gallen Mafia. I think that's true as well. The church is very big. There are many different groups. The St. Gallen Mafia is definitely powerful. Patrolman Marshall's talked a lot about that. However, there's more to it than meets the eye. So interesting answer from him. Next question. This is about Pope Benedict. He says, in his book, Non è Francesco, He is Not Francis, Antonio Socci argues that from the point of view of canon law, the election of Francis to the papal throne did not take place in a regular manner, and that the conclave of 2013 is illegitimate. What is your opinion on this? So I have never read that book. I'm not of the opinion that Pope Benedict is still the Pope, but I also know that Antonio Socci is an extremely important scholar. So we'll see what he has to say about that book, Vigano, that is. He says, the reconstructions of Antonio Socci follow the things that were let slip by Elisabetta Piquet, who is very close to Bergoglio, Pope Francis, and Austin Ivory. He's kind of the English-speaking language papal biographer of the Pope. They seem plausible, even if they are not supported by unequivocal evidence. I think that's kind of my position too. Sure, it's possible, but I don't see unequivocal evidence. But at the same time, they have never been denied by the Holy See. And this has meant that speculations about the resignation of Benedict XVI and the maneuvers of the St. Gallen Mafia at the conclave have multiplied, creating dismay, confusion, and division among the faithful. I think that is really valuable. See, recently, Bishop Vigano came out and asked for an investigation into whether or not Pope Benedict was still the Pope, the conclave of 2013. I actually welcome that because if there could be an answer to this question, then we could have some clarity. I think that's really important. This is sort of, there's been confusion in the church about what's the church teach about this? What's the church teach about that? And we just want an answer. The Society of St. Pius X, to take it back to the beginning of the interview, they've had multiple meetings with Rome about normalizing canonical status and things. And consistently the question has been, show us how we can interpret this in line with tradition. and we'll do it. We'll see what you have to say. And there's just always this impasse that you get to where the questions just can't be answered sufficiently. So I think this is interesting that Vigano has taken this path. I really appreciate that, actually. He says, if we think of the Vatican's interventions on countless issues, its silence on such an important issue is disconcerting. That's true. Even greater is the bewilderment at the silence of the cardinals who participated in the conclave. Some appeal to the pontifical secret, but in the face of possible violation of the norms provided for by Apostolic Constitution, the Apostolic Constitution, Universi Dominici Gregis, which would render the election of the pontiff invalid, there is no justification for this prolonged silence. I know from a reliable source that when Cardinal Giovanni Battista, who as vice dean of the College of Cardinals, presided over the 2013 conclave, was questioned privately and asked which paragraph of the Apostolic Constitution Universi Dominici Gregis was the basis for the conclave proceeding to a third scrutiny on the evening of the election, he refused to answer, asserting in an emphatic and angry way that everything had taken place regularly. Sooner or later, the truth will emerge and the very serious damage done to the church will have been denounced and repaired. I like how he says repaired there. Sometimes people get in this path and it's just going to be all, negative and we're all screwed, and I don't think that's appropriate. He says here that this certain cardinal was upset at having to clarify that it was valid. To be honest, that could also just be a leftist cardinal does not want there to be doubt on the fact that their favorite type of cardinal became pope because he was sort of a leftist in his politics. So there's many reasons why that could be the case. Although I don't think it is wrong for Vigano to come out and ask for clarification on the issue, because clarification will help everybody. The truth will set you free, as the Bible says. Okay, last question here, I believe. He asks, the institutional Catholic Church, which has for some time now been committed to ecumenism and in line with the logic of approval advocated by the globalist oligarchs, seems today to aim at the creation of a single religion, a syncretism that mixes monotheistic doctrines and pagan beliefs, such as the Andean cult of the Pachamama. Is this an act of homicide, or is it rather a suicidal gesture? When you translate into English, things sound a little bit different. He says both. Okay. On the one hand, the corrupt part of the hierarchy, which for the sake of brevity I call the deep church, since it is subservient to Satan, hates the church as the mystical body of Christ and intends to kill her, just as happened to the church's head. But we know that just as Christ is risen, so his mystical body will also be resurrected after her passion. Sounds like Marcel Lefebvre here. So, yes, those who serve the devil carry out a murderous operation, however crazy and doomed to failure. On the other hand, the healthy portion of the hierarchy, okay, so he thinks there's a healthy portion, that's good, is mostly composed of bishops and clerics who nevertheless accept the ideological premises of the present apostasy, since they accept the council and the new liturgy that conveys its errors to the masses. Fair enough. They do not want the church to succumb, but they are deluding themselves against all the evidence and after 60 years of failure by thinking that the council has merely been misinterpreted, that the new mass is celebrated badly, but that we can return to a certain dignity in the liturgy. That ecumenism is good as long as it is only with the Eastern Orthodox, but not with idolaters. But if they are not convinced that the crisis began with Vatican II, if they do not understand that it was the council that caused this disaster, and that to remedy it, it is necessary to return to the faith, morals, and liturgy that existed before the council, they are unwittingly part of the problem. They, although with the best of intentions, represent that part of the moderates who, in the face of an attack on all fronts, if they do not fight, constitute an obstacle to the solution of the crisis. Their support for the council and the secularized mentality of the deep church makes their gesture certainly suicidal. Strong words there. Okay. I don't agree with Bishop Vigano that the council was the beginning of the problems. Although when we're talking about historical things, it is useful to have something to latch onto, to say, what can we point to this thing, rather than hypothesis about, what was the current of thought a certain amount of time before the council and how do we interpret that? That's a little bit more squishy. But when you say there were a bunch of documents written, signed by bishops and the Pope and so forth, they were promulgated, a liturgy was promulgated, there is where your issues really take hold. I think that's fair. And he does say some hard truths that, you know, listen, there are a lot of really faithful, good, conservative Catholic priests and so forth out there, but they wouldn't call themselves traditional. There are even folks who would call themselves traditional priests who still wouldn't go to a certain level. You know, if you believe there are certain issues, then you have to deal with the root of those. You can't just say, you know, we'll cast aside the cause of this thing, but we'll just work really hard with what we have. There's going to be some sort of impasse that you get to at a certain point. Okay, so Archbishop Vigano has some strong words about a lot of different topics. As I said, that was only the first 4 or 5 questions of about a 12-question interview. The rest is concerning Italian politics. If you would like to read the rest, you can go to Marco Tassati's blog. It's right there. I think it's called Stilum Curiae. That's the name of his blog in Italian or in Latin, but it's in English and in Italian. He sometimes translates. Okay, so I said stay tuned till the end. Click the link in the description. We have a Patreon account available. You can find all the information about that there to help us to help support us. There are different tiers. So, for example, at a certain tier, you will get a electronic copy of my book, Lockdown with the Devil. At other tiers, you will get a signed copy of my book or multiple books. And you will also be the first to hear about certain things if you put on the mailing list. And there will be videos available to you before everybody else as well. So there are various benefits to being a part of this subscription. But to be honest, a lot of it is just we need support to continue this and grow. We're getting amazing support. We just want to continue to grow. We all need to put our money where our interests are. You know, we give money to Netflix and whatever. You know, if we'd like to grow stuff that we are confident that will be good, if we'd like to support things that we know will serve a good purpose, and we also want to have a good quality to it, then we do have to support it. That's just the reality. You know, we don't have to do exactly what the secular world does with entertainment. Of course not. A lot of it's bells and whistles. But let's be honest. I'm sure you like the fact that this has a good sound. I'm sure you would enjoy the fact that the video and stuff will improve. I'm sure you like the fact that it'll be more interactive. This also helps with evangelization in the age of the internet. It's just a fact. So sometimes I wish the internet would go away, but as long as we have it, we need to figure out a way to be as good as everybody else is on it. Okay, that's all. So click the link in the description to help support this channel, and like and subscribe to this video and to this channel. And I think that's about it. So until next time, I'm Benedict. God bless.